My name is Abdiel Vázquez. This is Maestro in Tune, and it's very nice to see you again, to speak to you again. You may have noticed, if you've been following this podcast, that I took a small hiatus. I usually release the episodes every 2 weeks, but I skipped the last one, which was supposed to be released on October 9th. And that's because of a couple of reasons. Number one, October 9th was nothing other than my 40th birthday. And also that very same day, I had a concert with my orchestra in Monterrey, with La Super. We were performing Berlioz' Symphonie Fantastique in this huge production with it. So that was a heavy day for me. In general, it was a heavy week. If you listened to or watched the episode I did on conductors and the job of conductors, you must imagine that those 3 weeks that I spent in Monterrey must have been very, very loaded with work. And yes, I'm still on the road. Right now I'm in Dallas, Texas. I did a couple of episodes when I was in Williamsburg, Virginia back in September. Then I was 3 weeks in Monterrey for 3 different programs with my orchestra. And now I am in Dallas. And naturally, having had my 40th birthday, it was wonderful in my hometown. My wife was there, my parents were there, and the concert took place, in what was my alma mater, the Conservatory of Music in Monterrey. So it was very significant. It was also a great moment to reflect on my life, on my professional life, on my life in general, of course. And this is a little bit of what I want to talk to you about today, because now I'm in Dallas at the Dallas Opera, and it's kind of a big deal for me because this is a big opera company. But the job that I'm doing here, it's very different from what I usually present, publicly. And that only has to do with the nature of the job. It's not because I don't usually do this. Actually, I've been working with opera companies during all my professional life. The very first time was back in 2004, when I was in a production of La Bohème by Puccini as a rehearsal pianist. And as comparison, when I did my debut with orchestra, that took place in 2003. So my lives as a soloist, as a pianist soloist, and as a pianist for the opera world and for opera companies had almost the same duration, and they have taken place parallelly. So now I'm at the Dallas Opera Company. I'm the assistant conductor, and I'm part of the musical preparation staff. And this is a great company. They have budget. Actually, it's amongst the top 10 opera companies in the US. And the way this is measured by annual budget. Opera America in New York established sort of this yardstick, this measurement, where they call opera companies that have more than $15 million a year in budget. They call them Budget 1. Of course, you have the Metropolitan Opera in New York, which was way more than that in budget. That's the biggest in the world. But you have also LA Opera, San Francisco Opera, Lyric Opera of Chicago, Houston Grand Opera, Washington National Opera, I believe Seattle Opera, Santa Fe, and the Dallas Opera. And what does it mean? Well, it's a very, very professional environment. It's a big team. It's a great rehearsal space, a wonderful theater, a lot of staff, and you feel taken care of. You feel very pampered, and it feels very, very professional. So it's a very cool environment. And the nature of the job is completely different when you're a soloist or a conductor. When you're a soloist or a conductor, when I'm a soloist or a conductor, you're used to your name being there, at the head of the program. It's in the headlines, it's in the marquee of the theater or whatever. You are there in the press conferences. A lot of it has to do with who you are as an artist. It's a lot of the personality of the artist. Whereas in opera, when you're a pianist for an opera company, it's the complete opposite. It's a very functional job. Your name is probably somewhere at the back of the program as part of the music staff or as part of the musical preparation team. In my case, as an assistant conductor, so I am the right hand, so to speak, of the conductor of this production. In this case, the production is Péléas et Mélisande, which is an opera by Claude Debussy. It's not a well-known opera. It's not performed often. Actually, it's the very first time it's performed in this company or in the state of Texas. And the reason being that it's a very, very difficult opera for everyone involved. So I was hired because they trusted that I could do this job. You know, they required a very good pianist, somebody that also has experience, a lot of experience with singers, with the French language. And at the end, you have a very specific job, which is play the piano for the rehearsals. There's staging rehearsals, a lot of staging rehearsals, and make sure that the singers are ready for when they go to the main stage to perform with the orchestra with all the staging. And then my job is done. I don't get to perform, I don't get to be a part of the shows. That's the nature of the job. So jobs like these are what make very evident, or they put in the surface something that's sometimes hidden when you get to perform as a soloist or as a conductor, which is the fact that this is indeed a job that they require not me as a pianist, they require a pianist, someone with certain qualities and certain capabilities and a certain level of experience that can come and do this for the overall good and success of the whole project. So this is my job here, and this is what I want to talk to you about today, and what it does mean to be a professional in the world of music and in the world of classical music. In my case, I have experience being a professional in the world of opera, in the world of conducting, in the world of being a soloist. The experience sometimes feels different, but at the core, there's two basic principles, and that's what I want to talk to you about today, because I've gotten to think a lot about this recently. So I want to go back to the first time I did any sort of job in the world of opera, and that was in 2005. And I believe I have spoken about this before, when I was invited at the last minute to a summer program in Italy. This is where I met Mignon Dawn and Trish McCaffrey, the voice teachers that I talked to you about in the episode about habits. And I also met many other wonderful teachers and wonderful, coaches, conductors that are still part of my professional life to this day. And these summer programs in opera are a common thing in the world of opera education. Basically, you have some of the best faculty. In this case, most of them were based in New York, others were based in Europe. And what they do is that during the summer hiatus from the schools or the universities in which they work, or from the opera companies in which they're working and singing throughout the year, they do a program, like a month thing, in a country, in this case Italy, which is like the cradle of opera, the Italian language and the Italian culture. And students from all over the world come there and they form new connections, they meet new friends, they get to perform, they get to take like a very intensive, course on lessons, coachings, language, etc. So it's a wonderful experience for everyone involved. And what do programs like these require? Well, they require pianists. They require pianists that can come and work a lot. So at that time, it seems like this program got in trouble because a pianist canceled at the last minute. I never knew who it was or why they canceled. But the point is that with maybe 1 week or 2 weeks before the program started, they were looking for a pianist. And that's very hard to find someone who can suddenly go to Italy and spend there a month. And the terms of it, which are common, are that you're not getting paid. In reality, you're more like an intern. You go to learn, you go to gain experience, you go to make connections, and they provide for your lodging, some food, like maybe some breakfasts or some lunches here and there, but in reality you take care of your own food, and you have to get yourself to Italy. So it's not that easy. And somebody found me, somebody knew about who was going to be in that program, knew about me in Mexico, knew that there was some pianist that was a good pianist, but that also loved opera. Maybe it's a good chance. And for me, this was like, this is incredible. I would love to do this. So I went and moved around and I found the sponsorship, somebody who could give me the flight. As long as I could get there, I'm good. They're providing me a place to sleep. I will be fine with food. I'm used to eating like one meal a day, 2 meals a day. It's not a problem whatsoever. So I got there and they prepared me. They're like, this is not gonna be an easy job whatsoever. I already arrived when the program had started. It had already been a few days. So other pianists were already sort of assigned their tasks. So I was giving all the difficult tasks that other pianists have sort of rejected or not taken, or sort of said, well, the other pianists will take care of it when they arrive. And that was me. So I arrived and I was told what I had to do, and I just went ahead and did it. And my job was to pretty much fulfill whatever was expected of me. It's whether it was playing for voice lessons, whether it was playing for rehearsals, if they were staging any opera scenes, whether it was playing for master classes, or whether it was like student recitals and I had to learn this or that repertoire. So a lot of the time, if I was not working, playing in any of these things, I was then finding some room to practice so that I will be able to learn all the repertoire that I have to learn. And actually, when I arrived, they told me, you will also perform, you will also be the pianist in our semi-staged version of Suor Angelica, which is an opera by Puccini. It's an hour-long opera. So I got to learn that one opera in those 3 weeks. Not because I'm great at that, but more because I just went ahead and did the job, because I was like, this is what I came for. They're giving me a place to stay. They're giving me this opportunity. I better do well. I better just go and practice and learn. So it was very nice when at the end of the program, there's like a dinner and I get to sit with the grown-ups. I get to sit with the faculty and the director of the program. His name was Bill Woodruff, a great voice teacher. He passed away a few years ago. A great educator, also very smart man, with a very, very quick wit. So the faculty was sort of complimenting me. They were saying, it's so nice, wow, it was so great working with you. They used the word refreshing, which I guess they meant, I was kind of young and coming from Mexico, which was not that common in that context. But they were also happy with the fact that they could work well with me and that I was just happy to do whatever was asked of me. And then Bill Woodruff, I guess he felt these were like too many compliments, and he was correct. And he said something like, well, it's just nice for someone to come and do their job. And everybody laughed because everybody knew exactly what he meant. In reality, they were just complimenting me for doing my job. And I didn't think I deserved those compliments because indeed I thought I was just doing what was expected of me. But you can only imagine, if this was such an extraordinary thing, what were they used to, what's the norm commonly in those things. Maybe pianists arrive and they're not always on time, or they're not always prepared, or they complain if they have to do this or that. At some point they're like, what, this is too much, or I don't know. I just know I went and did my job, and apparently that was nice. So I got to learn quickly that sometimes that's all that's expected of me, and that could get me very far if I just go and do my job. Now, I want to compare this with how my professional life started as a soloist, because I didn't necessarily have that mindset. The mindset that I had when I was in the opera world was like, okay, I come here to work, and I'm almost being, they're doing me a favor by giving me the opportunity to be there working, for them. And when I started as a soloist, I started because I was winning competitions. I was winning piano competitions. And if you have an idea of what that's like, it feels like glory, It feels like you went through all this process of elimination, It feels like a mini World Cup where you go through all these stages, and then you get to the finals and you get to play with an orchestra in a big hall, and there's a whole ceremony with announcing the winners. It feels like a big deal, and it probably is at that time, and you feel like a big shot, because now as part of the prizes, you get to be invited to perform with the different orchestras or to do solo recitals or this or that, And then when you get invited, your name is right there, you know, in the headline of the headliner in the program. You get invited to the press conferences, you get to be in front of the cameras, you speak to the microphone. So it feels a lot like there's a personality thing, like you're invited because you're a great artist, you know, and they're lucky to have you. You're the next big thing, you're the next big shot. Maybe there's something of it, but it took me a while to realize that this was not really the case, that at the end the competitions and all of this system to detect talent is exactly that, a sort of filtering system from which potential talents emerge, people that can then be hired to do a specific job. And in this case, the specific job being asked of me was to go play a soloist as part of the season of an orchestra. This is important because indeed conductors who take care of the programming of a season, they have a lot to plan. And when they have, and there's a lot of budget assigned to each concert. So who they invite as a soloist, it's a very big decision because that person needs to deliver. They need to come prepared. There's only going to be like a week of rehearsals. They need to be ready and they need to do their job. They need to get along well with the conductor, with the orchestra and everything. So it's a very specific job that requires a lot of trust on that person. So when I was connecting the dots back, looking back at my career, yes, I was not at all famous to the extent that I could drive ticket sales, especially if an orchestra that's established for 70 years and they have a yearly season with programs week after week, they already have an audience. You know, they don't need me to drive, you know, to bring more audience. They don't need me necessarily to, you know, they're not bringing me because I am charging more or charging less or anything like that, or because I am such and such artist. They were hiring me because I had proven that I could be a reliable artist to perform the job. And indeed, I noticed that wherever I was invited back is because I had done a good job. I had come prepared, I had played well, I had gotten along with the conductor, I had gotten along with the orchestra, with the staff of the orchestra, and therefore I did my job. Now, this might sound obvious, but this is important to notice, and this is the first aspect of doing your job that I wanted to talk about, which is doing your homework, you know, coming prepared. Usually when they invite you, by the time you arrive, by the time you get to meet the whole team, is the day of the first rehearsal. So the goal is not the day of the performance, the goal is that day of the first rehearsal. Because usually there's not that much time between the first rehearsal and the performance. So you better have done your homework. If you're a soloist, you better master that piece. You know, you better have it by memory. You better be able to start anywhere in the piece in case during the rehearsal the conductor says, okay, let's repeat this one section from this point. And you cannot be like, oh, sorry, maestro, where is that in the score? I cannot find it. Can we start from here? Or can we do that? I cannot start here. You're not being helpful, you know, if you're not ready to do that. If the conductor says, you know what, this needs to be faster, and you're like, oh, I'm sorry, I only practiced it at this one tempo. Or if you didn't look at the score to see which instruments are playing in this or that section that you're also playing, to see who you are partnering with at that moment, well, you didn't fully do your homework. If you're an opera singer and you arrive to a production and you don't know what the other characters in the show are singing, if you don't know what they're saying to you or what they're talking about when you're not there, if you only learned your lines, for example, you did not do your homework. If you are a conductor, right, and you're gonna conduct any symphonic piece, any standard piece, and you don't know every single instrument, and you didn't listen to at least, you know, 5, 8 different recordings, famous recordings with great conductors to know what are the traditions, what are the different tempo possibilities, because this is what the musicians will be expecting, you know. If you didn't do any of that, you did not do your homework. Therefore, you will not do your job as well. Why? Because at the end, you're part of a much bigger project than your own self. Even if your name is at the headline of the program, even if your name is in the marquee, even if you get to be the one doing the press conference that week, but you're still a part of a whole. You're still one more element in this whole machinery that is trying to just make music happen, you know, and there's a whole audience, there's a whole institution, there's personnel, there's a staff involved. So you have to come and do your job. You have to know your craft. You have to care enough about the whole project that you're ready to deliver, which is what you were hired for. So this is one aspect of it, and this is, I think, a very big aspect of doing your job. And the other aspect of it is the personal aspect of it. And I already talked a little bit about this. It's not just about delivering. It's not just about having done your homework and having mastered your craft well enough that you're ready to adapt to the musical and artistic needs of the moment. You know, if the stage director requires something different from you, or the conductor. But those are things that have to do with the artistic part, with the musical part. There's the whole other personal aspect of it, because at the end you're dealing with people the whole time. And the conductor that maybe you want to be confrontational with because you don't like his vision of the piece or her vision of the piece or whatever they're asking from you, well, you're still dealing with a person, and you better realize that that person has not just authority, but they have experience, they have dreams, they have ideas, they have passions. So you need to learn how to balance that with your own ideas, and realize that things are only going to work well if you manage to be a team together. And that's not just the case with the conductors, that's the case with the musicians of the orchestra. You may see just a blob of musicians, a blob of instruments, but in reality, each and every one of them is a person. It's a person, again, with hopes, with ideals, with dreams, with ideas on how the music goes, on how the music should go, with experience, with other conductors, with other soloists. So it's nice to realize that you can have a relation with them, a relationship with them, to be like, who are you, the concert master? How can we be a team? You know, how can we make this better? The staff of the institution, the staff of the orchestra, those are the people who, you know, wrote your contract, who read every single email you sent. So you better have been nice in all those emails, even if you have demands here or there. Those are the people who cut your check. And many, many times, these people are former musicians who decide they still want to be in the music world, even if it is in the administrative part of it. So they decide to become part of an orchestra or of an opera company or some artistic institution. So all of those are personal relationships. And what I'm saying may seem quite obvious to you once I say it, but I want to explain why I'm making a big point of this and why it's sometimes not that obvious. And for this, I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent that I hope doesn't take too long or doesn't delve too deep that you tune out, because I want to talk about what usually is the mark of professionalism, which is the institutional aspect, that there's contract and that there's money. There's a contract and there's money involved. And usually when those two elements are there, then we're like, okay, we are in the professional world. And when we are in the professional world, we make a distinction between what is professional and what is personal. This is very much in our culture. People actually say things like, well, don't take it personal, it's business. You know, it's just business, it's not personal. People even talk about not doing business, you know, going into business partnerships with their friends because they don't want to ruin the friendship or something like that, which is an interesting thought, because wouldn't you want to, you know, partner with people that you trust or that the people that you get along with the best? But yes, there's this idea that the professional thing is separate from what's personal. And this is not just an ethereal idea. It's actually at the core of the origin of why we even draw contracts, of why we even exchange money. And of course, this requires a whole another episode, if at all, on a historical digression on the origin of contracts and money. Today, we see it as part of everyday life. Some people would even say that at the heart of so-called civilized society is the institutions, the contracts, the private contracts between two parties, and the fact that they can be enforced, all right, by laws. The funny thing about this is precisely the word that I have used, which is enforced. At the heart of a contract, which sometimes is equated to a handshake, in reality is the opposite of a handshake. A handshake is a relationship of trust where two parties are giving their word to each other. A contract, by its nature, implies lack of trust. And underlying the contract is enforceability. And enforceability is usually a threat of some form of violence. Maybe the least harmful of it, so to speak, would be you get fired, right? And maybe you get fired without any compensation or without any severance if you really didn't do your job. But also, you can be sued or you can sue back. And in some cases, there can even be criminal prosecution, right? There's always enforceability. We see this with the social contract. At the end, behind every single law that governs our behavior towards each other, behavior that sometimes you would think this is just common sense. I'm not going to go hit my neighbor. I'm not going to go fight with them or steal or anything. But behind each and every one of these principles is the enforceability through violence. There's police, there's military, there's a whole judicial system. Why is this? Because the origins of contracts have to do precisely with war, with violence. At the end, a peace treaty can only be signed if there are two armies, on each side. So there's always this inherent lack of trust. And it's not that obvious today because it's so ingrained in our whole society that sometimes we even say that we sign a contract precisely because we trust each other. We just see it as a formality. Why wouldn't you sign a contract if you trust me, But in reality, it's two completely different things, the relationship of trust and the relationship based on lack of trust. The same happens with money. When money would exchange hands, the money as we know it, as cash, that also that has its origins in war, because just like with contracts, the implication is that you can walk away from each other, never to see each other again. This is completely different from small communities that you see. You would have to go in history, to the past, to pre-money, pre-institutions societies, which there are tons of examples. There's examples today in civilizations, or societies, communities that have not been touched by, globalization. But also, you can see that in places, for example, where the big economy has collapsed, and there's no cash at hand, and people still, in what you would call maybe poorer communities, but there are small communities that they know each other, and they still have to eat. They still have to purchase goods and exchange goods and services with each other. So how do they do it when there's no money, or where there's no institutions to enforce private contracts? They do it through credit. And that has been the case throughout most of human history. When you talk about communities, where people know each other, or at least know someone, they're all connected to each other by 1 or 2 points of connection. And this can be big enough communities. I'm not talking about 100 people. It could be thousands of people. But still, there's a system of credit where you're like, hey, I'm good for this. Do this for me. I'll do something for you in the future. Or give me this now, put it in my account, put it in my tab. I'm good for it. I'll pay you back. I'll deliver. Or if you owe something to someone and that someone owes something to someone else, they can say, hey, my friend can pay you back because he owes me and I owe you. And they would only trust that if I have a reputation of someone that is credit worthy, someone who is trustworthy. So in these societies, trust is everything and your reputation is everything. How you deal with others, how you relate to others, and how well you're known for doing your job, for delivering, for keeping your word, for keeping your promises. See how this is completely different from a society that's based in lack of trust. Now, the funny thing is that today, in today's world, we have both things combined. We do live in a world made of institutions and of laws and of contracts, but our core humanity, which is based on personal relationships and on, community, is still there. So it still surfaces and it still permeates everything, even if we are dealing with institutions and with contracts and with laws. What does this mean? And why did I go into this whole tangent? Think about any job, especially if you're an artist, if you're a musician, if you're a singer, think about any single job you have gotten and how many of those really started with a personal relationship. In my case, I cannot tell you how many conductors contacted me even through a Facebook chat, or now they got my number, they send me a WhatsApp message for some of the most informal things in the world. Hey Abdiel, would you be interested? I'm trying to program this or that concerto for next year. Would you be interested? Yes, I'm interested. Okay, good. You will receive an official email. You will receive an official letter. The official happens after the personal, once the handshake has been done, the virtual handshake. How many times, you meet someone, you click personally, you are like, well, maybe we can work together in the future, and then that materializes later, and then maybe later there's a contract, there's money involved, and I cannot tell you how many times, and this was probably not right, but this is just how things are. How many times in Latin America I signed the contract the day of the performance? I was about to go on the stage. I'm in my dressing room and the staff comes, hey, by the way, maestro, could you please, we need to sign the contract. It's just a mere formality. And I'm like, well, sure, I also want to have a contract. Let's sign it. And they're like, and we will pay you next month. We promise you, we were just waiting for the money to arrive. The government has to approve, blah, blah. And sure, that would be the case. And indeed, I always got paid. Probably the longest an orchestra took to pay me was like more than a year and a half. And that's a problem in and of itself. But that's not the point I want to make right now. The point is that I was eventually paid. And the other point is that it didn't matter that there was a contract. Like, what am I going to do? Sue them, right? I don't have that money. I don't have that time. I don't have the will to go through that process. Plus, if you go through that process, that means that the relationship has been broken. That means you were not able to solve things amicably. Probably the biggest example of this is a divorce, which is a contract. And you know that when lawyers get involved to talk about how the two parties are going to get out of this contract, that means that there's no longer a workable relationship amongst them. So the last thing you want to do is think about your relationship with institutions or with orchestras or with opera companies in terms of contracts, in terms of fee, in terms of money, because that means that the personal relationship is not there anymore. So to me, this was an important realization because everything is a personal connection. Everything is a relationship of trust. Many times, not many times, actually few times only, they would pay me in advance. And sure, I could run away with the money, especially if we hadn't signed the contract yet or something. But then what about it? I would never be invited again, and then my reputation would be ruined with all other orchestras. Likewise, in my own orchestra in Monterrey, if we don't pay our musicians, well, good luck getting them next time, and good luck getting any other musicians once our reputation is ruined like that. Does it matter if there was a contract or not? Does it matter, the institutionality of it? What really matters is the trust that we put on each other. So it really comes down to one thing that I think explains both aspects of what I have been talking about, what is a professional, right? And one thing is how well you do your job, how well prepared you are, and the other is how well you take care of your personal relationships with every single person involved in the project, no matter the size of the institution. It could be the biggest institution, it could be the smallest one, it could be a huge staff, it could be a 2-person team. They could be paying you a lot of money, they could be paying you very little money. Your level of care is what matters, and your level of care should never change because it does not depend on the size of the institution, on the size of the fee, on the importance of whoever is inviting you. This is a standard that as an artist you need to have with your own self, or as a person. This is a standard that you need to have with your own self. How much do I care about my craft and my artistry that I prepare well enough to do my job? And how much I care about my trustworthiness, my relationship with others, how safe others feel with me, how at ease others feel when I'm part of a project. Do I make everyone feel at ease? Do I make everyone happy, that they're dealing with me and not with someone else? And that includes the conductor, the staff, the musicians, every single person, the driver that's taking you from one place to another. Everyone is important and every single relationship matters, and it all comes down to care. So if you care about those two things, that's when I believe you're being a true professional, or in the words of Bill Woodruff, you will have come and done your job. What you listened at the beginning of this episode and what I want to close with is Rachmaninoff's Fourth Concerto. And I use this piece of music that I'm performing, and in this case of this video, I'm with the Culiacan and Sinaloa Symphony Orchestra in Mexico. The conductor is Miguel Salmon. And I use this piece because it's one of those pieces that I was hired to play. The first time was back in 2014 in an orchestra in Yucatan, and the conductor was programming all the Rachmaninoff concertos. And at that time, I had won competitions performing the second concerto, the third concerto, and that's what I thought I wanted to play, and people wanted to hear me play. In reality, what the conductors would say to me were like, for those famous concertos, we already have the famous pianists coming. We have international pianists with a big name. We need someone who can play the fourth concerto that nobody plays, nobody wants to play. Can you do it? So the first time I said yes, and having said yes that first time, having being a professional, prepared myself to do that job. I'm not being hired because I'm Abdiel Vázquez who plays Rachmaninoff Third Concerto. I'm hired because I'm a reliable pianist who can learn the Fourth Concerto. That experience got me so many other invitations, because then many other orchestras who were programming Rachmaninoff series would go through the same process, and they would be like, who knows the Fourth Concerto? Well, Abdiel knows the Fourth Concerto. Let's invite Abdiel. And that became one of my most performed concertos. Now, it's not a bad concerto at all, as you will hear. What you were hearing at the beginning of the episode is the first movement. And now I will leave you with my favorite, which is the second movement. I hope you enjoy. I would love to know what you think about all of this. Please leave your comments, send me messages. I am Abdiel Maestro on social media. This is Maestro in Tune. My name is Abdiel Vázquez. I'll see you next time.